After the loss of Bulia, Yaldo allowed the armies of Gaiuk and Mankai, Mengu, to pass through Idle into Bastar and to cross from Sembatuba, Simbir district, into the dominions of Mardan-Belak. Bypassing the fortress of Arbun, Mankai captured Abdakisha, ford across the Volga, and assisted Gaiuk's units to cross the Idhel. The two enemy armies, the strongest in the Tatar army, then besieged Banjar and part of the Mardan-Belak capital area, where Altynbek and Bokman were entrenched. The new commander, Boyan Mohammed, ordered the Kargalin army to advance into Bertaz, the right bank of the province of Mardan-Belak, and Yunus led his fighters out of Ulug-Bulgar into Bertaz, the capital of Boyan. On the way, he broke the enemy siege of Arbuga and joined the Arbujans to his army. On the road from Arabga to Bertaz, Hager-Uglay, now recovered, returned to command the army. In the meantime, Gaiuk, having captured Buzat, went out against Surarabat, the chief eastern shield of Bertaz-Uba. Unexpectedly for the Tatars, Hager-Uglay attacked the Kaimans and Turkmen who besieged the fortress of Yala. The besiegers fled, and Gaiuk returned to Buzat because Hager-Uglay's army could appear in his rear. Satisfied with Hager-Uglay's actions, Boyan Mohammed, who had become the co-ruler of Ak-Bulgaria, appointed the emir as Sadr of the state's Burat army. Bokman, elected after the death of Altynbek as the new king, approved this appointment. If Hager-Uglay had been allowed to join to his army the 15,000 warriors of the governor of Miryuba or of Mushkul, Turgan, the brother of Erman, he would certainly have driven the Tatars from Banj. Even the flamboyant but weak warrior Gaiuk understood this, and ultimately asked Subiatai to eke Mushkul's forces. Subiatai, who had little more than 90,000 of the 302,000 fighting men left, urgently begged Batay for reinforcements and sought help from the emir of Kizilbulgar Ghazi-Baba. Batay asked the Kakan, emperor of the Tatars, for a 30,000-strong corps of Ordu's son, Koryimtsa, and Ordu immediately became elated and began to place himself on a level with Guyuk and Batay. Ordu's claims were always and in everything supported by Jagatai's, Genghis Khan's son, Baidar, because of which he became Ordu's best friend. But in the discussion of the most important questions, Gaiuk's opinion remained decisive, for all saw in him the future ruler. And his father, Kakan Ugatai, was influenced more than anyone by his wife, Kamish, who had fallen completely under the influence of the Yehudis, Talmudists. The Guyuk she brought up also, like her, served the house of Nathan, and named his son after the then head of the house of Jehud, Silma, Shem. Ghazi-Baba also helped Subiatai. He commanded Ablasin Bodri to hand over the city of Saraikin, Tsaritsin, to the corps of Mankai's brother, Busek, and he complied. Thanks to this, the Tatars succeeded in advancing against Mushkul from the south, and Turgan threw almost all his forces into defending the frontiers of his province. And Hager-Uglay with his forces failed to break through the Tatar fortifications around Banjar-Suba, and the capital of Mardan remained in enemy encirclement. But due to frequent attacks by the Burghers' army, Gaiuk and Mankai were unable to capture Saban-Banjar during the winter and spring. In December 1236, at the insistence of Hager-Uglay, Boyan Mohammed became the co-ruler of Ak-Bulgaria. And immediately after the surrender of Saraikin to the Tatars, Bodri, on the orders of Ghazi-Baba, besieged Boyan Mohammed in Bertaz. Seeing that from here the king would not be easily expelled, Ghazi-Baba proposed to Boyan Mohammed to exchange Bertaz and Kazan. This exchange was much more advantageous to the king than to Ghazi-Baba, because only Kazan linked together all the northern provinces of Ak-Bulgaria that remained unconquered by the enemies, so I believe in Ghazi-Baba's words about Ghazi-Baba's desire to preserve the independence of the northern part of Ak-Bulgaria by way of allowing there the implacable defender of Ak-Bulgaria's independence, Boyan Mohammed. On the orders of Ghazi-Baba, his son Hissam handed over Kazan to Boyan Mohammed and moved to Ulf-Bulgar, in response to which the king handed over Bertaz to Bodri. But very soon 20,000 warriors of Hager-Uglay besieged Bertaz and forced Bodri to move away from here to Razi-Suba, a town in Mardan. Hager-Uglay did this arbitrarily, but Ghazi-Baba did not stir up this conflict. By these two steps Ghazi-Baba helped to preserve the independence of Ak-Bulgaria, and this the Bulgarians will never forget. Boyan Mohammed was raised to the throne, besides Hager-Uglay, by the Ulubak of Mushul Turgan Askala, Goluberkit, whom the Ulugh-Bek of Sarshin-Tuga sent to Boyan's aid with 7,000 Karachay-Alan Circus, Karachavs, and AK Circus, Kumis, and Kurbanas, the Bar of Erta-Bulgar or Budin, the basin of the North Donets, the Karacharandash of AK-Bulgar. When Boyan Mohammed entered Kazan with the Bahadirs of Goluberkit, the hearts of the inhabitants of Arja-Bulgar, one of the names of the independent North Bulgar, were relieved from anxiety and filled with joy. Thanks to the mediation of Ghazi-Baba, the emir of Kizil-Bulgar, the Mongol-dependent Central or Samara Bulgaria, the Tatars recognized the independence of Arja-Bulgar or Mengu-Bulgar, which they began to call more simply just Mengu, i.e. a Bulgarian state, in Finnish. This name strongly resembled the Kara, Finnish, name of Bulgar, Banjar or Banjar, which some of the Kara pronounce in the forms Manjar or Bungar. The Jugrai, Ugri, pronounce this name in the form Myjar. The word Arjus among the Echko-Bulgarians, the internal Bulgarians, means pure, independent, free. It is said that from this word the word Ardjak-homeland homeland is derived. The noble Boyan Mohammed, in response to the noble deeds of Ghazi-Baba, promised him that he would by all means avoid clashes with him. But the war against the Tatars Boyan did not cease. The king very quickly re-established a reliable connection with his Arja-Bulgar provinces, and the Ulugh-Bek of Baygul, Taybuga Kakani, a descendant of Jangi, came to him in Kazan without delay to report. The governor of Bisu, the province extending along the upper reaches of the Vyatka to the mouth of the Pechura, Anbul, and the Ulugh-Bek of Urai, the North Urals. Sakhta they reported that the Bulgarian power in their lands had not been shaken and that there were no Tatars with them. Only the Ulugh-Bek of Anja, the province from the Gulf of Bothnia on the Baltic Sea to Pechura, could not arrive, because the Balinese, Suzdalites, had taken Ak-Bulgaria, Ustyug, and together with the Galicians, Novorodians, cut the road from Tavrishtai, Finland, to Talib, Tallinn, the capital of Anja province. Bilik's son, Tawfik, based in Talib, sent to Kazan only his men Bashi a millenarian, for he feared to leave the city because of the constant attacks on its outskirts by the Balinese. When in 1237 Boyan Mohammed learned of the fact that the Tatars had set out to seize Balayn, he advanced with his eldest son Ibrahim to Ak-Bulgaria, Ustyug, as early as the month of Caves, November, 1237, and during the winter, 1237 to 1238, he took possession of it without a fight. Then he burned Kara-Juktan on Sukhona, and thereby forced the frightened Galicians, Novorodians, to open to the Ak-Bulgarians the Unjay road to Karel and Tavrishtai. A little later the Galicians returned to the Ak-Bulgars or Arja-Bulgars part of the territories they had seized from the Unja, and relations with the Galij-Bulgars or Bulgar-Ulkarij, Outer Bulgaria, Novgorod the Great, were normalized. The Galiji then claimed that when the Balinese, Suzdals, in alliance with the Tatars attacked the Bulgars in 1236, they, by temporarily seizing part of the Bulgarian north, saved it from Balinese defeat. Indeed, after the Galician invasion, the property of the Bulgarians did not suffer, and Bulgara Vasai, Bulgarian Pass or Pass today at the town of Tashkent, was destroyed. Vilsk is the Arkhangelsk region, continued to be guarded jointly by Galician and Bulgarian detachments. This pass united two Bulgarian possessions in the Ak-Unja governorates, Shudunja, Finland, Karelia, and Zadonezhi, and Kambere, Tsars Pomeri, or by Juktun, the Great Underpass, Northern Underpass, and Lower Metelis. Ghazi-Baba writes that in northeastern Europe, the Ilkari district on the left bank of the lower Ungai, Onega, river belonged to the Galicians, the Baltai district south of the Ilkari to Ak-Bulgar, the Ungai district, between the right bank of the Dolan Ungai and the left bank of the Dolan Tun, North Dvinar, or Duna, to Ak-Bulgar, the district of Sargay, Onega Peninsula, and Saru-Utrau, Solovetsky Islands, to Galids, the district of Muksai, Puksazira, south of the Ungai district, to Galids, the district of Bulari on the banks of the river Bulari, Varga, a left tributary of the North Dvinar on the Ak-Bulgar, the Kuksai or Petserna, Bose, Dacha, Onega, below and Kubensko area, on the Ak-Bulgar and on the Galids, the Kulari district between the right bank of the lower Danube and the left bank of the lower Midzan or Midjai, Menzel River, on Ak-Bulgaria, the Ulay district, between the right bank of the middle Danube and the left bank of the lower Izma, Menzel River, on Ak-Bulgaria. Isma, a left tributary of the Pechora, on Ak-Bulgar, the Midjai district, between the right bank of the upper and middle Midzin, Menzel, and the left bank of the Bidja, Pesa, River, on Galids, the Khan-Suluri district, between the mouth of the Midzin and the Saibar, Soima, River, on Ak-Bulgar. From the Uglay district to the Mijay district, the Galicians passed only through the Ak-Bulgar fortress of Lechek, at the mouth of the Bashka, so that the bad men here were hunted out and apprehended. These Ak-Bulgarian districts, insured together with the Beyliks of Karel, Karelia, and Tavrishtai, Finland, constituted the Ak-Bulgarian province of Unja, whose capital was the city of Tallinn. According to Ghazi-Baba and Ibrahim or Bulir Ibrahim, the brother of Boyon Mohammed, the Kars of Shud, the Finns of northeastern Europe, were divided into Nermai and Kumai or Tumai, Komi. The Tumaris inhabited the eastern part of the Shud, or Dorshud, Great Shud, and the Nermais the western, reaching to Lake Unja, Oniga. Dorshud is often confused with two other Shuds, Sushud, Estonia, in the northern part of Bistu Arjun, Baltics, and Ertashud, Middle Shud, where Galids or Galids Bulgar, Novgorod Arblast, was located. Bulir Ibrahim, who was at first a favorite guard of Chelbia and later, from 1233, a Koshbegi, commandant of Bulia and governor of Baituba, wrote about it. In Bulia, as in Ulug Bulgar, Koshbegs often performed the duties of Ulugbegs as well. As a duty of his office, Bulir Ibrahim also sometimes fulfilled the role of Kurgan, reviser, inspector, of Shud and knew the governorate of Unja well. He possessed a good character, and therefore under all kings he remained a Koshbeg of Bulia. In 1236, Altynbek ordered him to act against the Tatars together with Ghazan, which is why he remained alive. But in 1078, when the Tatars of Mankai Taima, Khan Mengu Timur, besieged Bulia, he, an old man of nearly 80 years, remained in the city and dealt the hated infidels, Mongolo-Mamapu, such cruel blows that they could not seize Ulug Bulgar. A splendid archer, he killed no less than 200 Tatars with his dagger, and before he perished, he killed 30 more enemies with his crossbow and bow. He fired from a tower whose entrance he ordered to be walled up. According to the law of Ghazi-Baba and Bulir Ibrahim, the descendants of Bar Unja Jugan ruled in the Beyliks of Tavrishtai and Karel, which were Kara-Andashlai, autonomous fiefs, of Ak-Bulgar. This Jugan in 372 did not hesitate to recognize Unja as a Kara-Andashlaiak of Kon Bulgar, whereas before that Unja was only an Ak-Andashlaiak of Bulgar. Jugan's son or Juki was Bulan, his son Kulan, his son Torgan, his son Uran, his son Alan, his son Tugan, his son Kadan, his son Sulan, his son Jalan, his son Ulan, his son Shugan, his son Ak-Boyon, his son Kashan, his son Rujan, his son Bujan, his son Turjan, his son Iljan, his son Sajan, his son Burjan, his son Tuijan, his son Boyonklib. All of them were Bulgarian Kara-Andash from Unja. Boyonklib had two famous sons, Trekkalib and Alakkalib. The descendants of Trekkalib, or the Tujans, ruled Tavrishtai, and the descendants of Alakkalib, or Alate, ruled Karelia. The Alatas also gave Ak-Bulgari splendid governors of Unja. The son of Trekkalib, or Abu, a graduate of King Ibrahim, 1006 to 1025, whom the Karaites called Abu, was Salib, his son Garib, who had two famous sons, Alap and Shorip, who built in the first capital of Tavrishtai on Lake Banjar the beautiful Barrage Mosque. Sharip's son was Tabib, his son Talib ruled from 1172 to 1204, his son Naib, his son Nazib, his son Sahib. All of them were Bargs of Tavrishtai and Kara-Andashis of Ak-Bulgar. Tabib was treacherously killed at a negotiation by the Birgalij, Swedes, in the town of Trekbulta, after which war broke out between Unja and Birgalij, Sweden. In this war, the then governor of Unja, Fake or Fayaz, relied mainly on the forces of the Karelian Bar Tujai Burma, who also temporarily ruled Tavrishtai. It fell to Tujai to construct a good fleet of light ships for the Mihans or Bijons, who easily slipped overland from one little river to another, by means of which ours easily defeated the enemies and compelled them to retire home. In these ships ours sailed on the Aryon Dinges, Baltic Sea, on the Serai Dinges, White Sea, as far as Cap Dalai, Kochek Peninsula. There, Tiryai built the fortress of Burma, Murmansk, i.e. Bulgar, in Kara, which was also called Tiryai Kala, Fortress of Tiryai. On this Serai Dinges hours sailed to Khan Sulai, where on Khan Yuba, Khan Peninsula, they built the fortress Khanba Lake Eskambalnitsa. The Kars built their ships on Lake Karel and then took them out on the river Baver, Gulf of Phipps. This lake consists of 5,000 ponds joined together, and is considerably larger than Lake Banjar, which is further west in the Tavrishtai Beylik and includes only 1,000 ponds. The Karaites speak the most ancient language, Iskesabash, Old Chuvash, or Locatelli, Loka language. As it is known after the first campaign of Lokair in Agil, Balkans, he displaced some of the Thracians to Kara Saklan, present-day Ukraine, and Ongol, right bank Ukraine, and left some of his Tuz, East Asians, in Agil. As a result of the mixing of the Old Agil language of the Thracians in Ongol and the speeches of the local Tuzes, the Novosibak language was formed, and with the mixing of the speeches of the Thracians and Tuzes in Agil, the new Agil language was formed. In addition, from the mixing of the Lokir language with the Jamagit, Samoyed language emerged the Jugra language, Ugric, Hungarian, and from the mixing of the Lokir and Sindhi languages emerged the Barsal, ancient Iranian, language. During the time of Lokair's second campaign in Agil and until his doom, he managed to bring out the Trek-speaking new Agil language and calling themselves Trek Bulgarians, Thracians, in Kara Saklan. Their neighbors called them Kulians or Bulgars. The new Agil language of these Kulians mixed with the Novosibak or Suva language, resulting in the Trek Bulgarian, Thracian Bulgarian, language, the ancestor of all Turkic languages. The Trek Bulgarians, speakers of this language, very soon conquered Kara Saklan. For love of wearing black cloaks, which they called Kara Bulgarian or Kara Kalpak, they began to call them Kara Bulgarians and Kara Kalpaks. Choka, together with the sons of Beta, Peter Oslajukovic, Kabar and Nankai, Philip Nyanka, was the best warrior in Berlin, Suzdal region, but Georgi Bezumny, who conspired with the Yehudis and Tatars, did not even give him a Buluk regiment. In the city of Yukon or Kisan, Ryazan, the best warrior was Kushtan, son of Georgi, but this Kisan Bar nicknamed Magar or Teek, Yuri Inuverovich Ryazan, and his brother Erman also entered into collusion with the Yehudis of the House of Naden and the Tatars, and they gave him no warriors. When Tatar ambassadors came to Kisan, Georgi Teek, the goat, said to them, "I will fulfill my promise and hand over Kisan to your kings without a fight." Georgi Bezumny said the same thing to the Tatar ambassadors. But when the Tatar ambassadors left to return, Kushan attacked them and killed them all. After that he suddenly became a hero in the eyes of many ordinary Kisan people and was immediately joined by no less than 5,000 non-Kisan fighters. Once Karajar, Yuri Muromsky, the father, David Muromsky, and the brother of whom died by Bulgarian arrows, blocked his way, but Kushtan defeated them completely and wounded this scoundrel badly in the leg. It is said that Karajar was fond of collecting the skulls of his enemies in the village, Karachivo, and dishonoring chaste virgins, but in military work he was no master. Karajar forced the Kanmardians to help the Tatars and gave the enemies a lot of products, horses, infantry. After Kichisite Bulat, Vsevolodyarovich was sent by his father under Kisan to help the Tatars, they besieged Kisan again. The Tatars demanded that Teek, Yuri Ryazansky, surrender the city. But he, frightened by the retreat of Kichisite Bulat, did not decide to come out. Then the Tatars attacked and, not looking at the fact that Teek ordered the soldiers not to resist the enemy, defeated Kisan and massacred all its inhabitants, including Teek himself. The Tatars then stormed the strong Balinese fortress of Kolomna. Here Jurgis the Fool sent 35,000 of his best fighters, led by the Sada Ermak, the warlord Ermi. This Ermak was obliged to protect the inhabitants of Kulama, mainly merchants and craftsmen, from the actions of the Tatars. The people of Kulama, besides being famous in trade and craftsmanship, were also famous in cooking, which is why they named the town after their favorite dish. The famous gourmet Saitbulat Ulugkoy often came here to taste local dishes. Ermak was utterly inept at warfare. Thus, it was his fault that no less than 10,000 Balinese warriors carelessly entered the deliberately abandoned Bulgarian fortress of Kalgan, one of the fortifications of Kazan, in 1220 and were burned together with the Beka-Yoleg of Kisan, Ryazan, after a volley of shreds Hiri, Bulgarian shells with incendiary mixture. But the Balinese rulers did not notice the loss of the Ulchi, Slavs, at all, but they did appreciate what Ermak was famous for, his efficiency. So this was the man who led the Balinese army. When they saw the large and well-armed army of the Balinese and the formidable fortress of Kulama, the Tatars shuddered. On both sides of Kulama, fortified lines set off, encircling the Tatar army in a semicircle. Even if such a dullard as Ermak had marched 20,000 local militiamen, always ready for battle, out to the lines and given the enemy a fight back, the Tatars would have been stopped. But instead Ermak, on the orders of Georgi Bezumny, disarmed the volunteers of the bearded Urus, Russians, and inhabitants of Kulama and invited the Tatars who had arrived to peacefully take the town. But the Tatars, seeing themselves in a gigantic snare comparable only to the Atnin and Bishtaman lines in Echka-Bulgar, ordered Kichisate-Bulat to disarm Ermak's army as well, which Erman Muinak managed to join. Kichisate-Bulat, trembling for his life, ordered the Balinese and Kisan armies to lay down their arms. Ermak and Muinak obeyed the order implicitly. The Tatars then attacked the disarmed crowd of Balinese and Kisans. Indeed, the Tatars, hearing from Kichisate-Bulat of the fabulous riches of Kulama, did not destroy this city, but only plundered it. From here they marched to Moscow, also a very strong fortress and with a fairly powerful defensive panata. At Mosha stood the valiant Choker and Nankai with their hundreds of desperate Bahadirijas, 5,000 garrison troops and 10,000 militia. Moscow was captured not so much by the Tatars as by 20,000 bearded Urus of the Boyar Tamta, son of Lyacha, Foma Lazkovich, who had crossed over to the Tatar side from the army of Kichisate-Bulat under Kulama, and more than 10,000 Kisan of Hin, Ingvar Ingvarovich, who knew well all the weak points of Moscow. Then the Tatars besieged the town of Ertebulima, Middle Bulgsha, Vladimir, or Ertebulimar, which our merchants often called Georgi Bazar, in memory of Georgi Bulgaruk, Yui Dolgaruki. In order to attract Bulgarian merchants here, Georgi Bulgaruk, being a true Bulgarian, allowed AK Bulgarians to trade without fees. Incidentally, the Bulgarian emirs, who benefited from Ghazi-Bara's arrangement with Ugatye for the capture by the Bulgarians of the eastern part of Balain, Suzdalshina, moved from east to west and north. No sooner had the Tatars defeated Kisan than Ghazi-Baraj, with the permission of the Emir Kavail, passed through his Tukran Beylik, Nizhnya Klyazma, and took without a fight the strong fortress of the bearded Urus Kur-Imen, Starodub, and King Boyan Mohammed returned AK Juktun, Astyug, to the Bulgars. When the Tatars approached Ertebulima, Musa with his Jers arrested Kichisate-Bulat and called on the inhabitants to fight back against the hateful wicked. The citizens stood behind Musa, and when the resident Yehudis took it upon themselves to censure them, they attacked them as their most vicious enemies. Saving themselves from a quarrel, the Yehudis took refuge in a grange, but the citizens burnt it with them. Musa then sent his Boyar Timur to Balain to organize resistance against the Tatars there, but the local Koshbeg of converted Yehudi, Tyram Ephraim, with feigned cordiality, succeeded in lulling Timur's vigilance and arrested him. When the Tatars arrived at Bolin, it was Tyram, carrying out the orders of Georgi the Fool, who handed Timur and the town over to them. Because of this, Tyram was appointed by the Tatars as the chief of the Ulf-Balain district of Balmain. Batay did not want to fight with the Kurils and even intended to recognize the independence of their Beylik, Nen Gujuk, enjoying the rights of the heir prince, declared the Kurils, the beardless Urus, to be rebels and ordered Batay to defeat Echka-Balain and the towns of Bulan and Kerenkalar, Urevparksky and the city of the Dragon, Pereyaslavl Zaleski, seized by the Kurils. Gujuk himself moved along the Kara-Idol road, along the Volga, where resistance was considerably weaker. The Tatars suffered great losses when storming the Kuril towns. They had a particularly hard time at Kerenkalar, where Bavar and Kabayulan attacked the besieged Batay from two sides. Some of the Kurils even managed to force their way to Batay's tent, but just then Mankai, Khan Mengu, came to his aid and saved him from perdition. It was even harder for Batay's Tatars to break through the Turai defensive lines, at Echkabalan, where the Kurils burned all the villages before the enemy and fought to the death for every fortification. At that time, when Batail's army was starving, Gayuk burned the surplus produce, if only not to share it with Batail. Only Subutai intervention saved Batail's men from starving to death. It is said that Subutai could have caught Gayuk's men in the act of burning the grain from them, and threatening Guyuk with exposure, forced him to hand over to Batay his needed stock of produce. On the return of the Tatars to Desht steppe, Gayuk had Batay storm the fortified localities and towns of Kara-Bulgar, Chernigov, and but for the skill of Subutai, great trouble would have befallen Batay here also. In the spring of 1237, the army of Hager-Uglay or Hagzazade attacked the Tatar troops under Saban Banjar, a Bulgarian town near Shigali, and after a short battle retreated to the town of Bertas, east of Penza. Near this town took place a battle of 30,000 Tatars with 22,000 Bahadurs of Hager-Uglay, which included 5,000 Kara-Bulgarians, Chernigovians, of the Khazail, Kozel, Bekjit, son of Bulima Kara-Bulgar, Vladimir Sviatoslavich, author of Slovo, and 2,000 Kisan, Ryazan, of the Bek Kushtan, Constantine. Here died valiantly fighting 12,000 Bulgarians together with Hager-Uglay himself, 1,000 Kisans with the Bey Kushtan and 1,500 Kara-Bulgarians, and also after this battle, the son of Hager-Uglay, Yunus with 3,000 Bulgars, 1,000 Kisans of the son of Kushtan, Astabi, Eustathius, and 3,500 Kara-Bulgarians of the Kazilbak Tate, with the help of a few thousand Mushes, Moksha, and Arjamesh, Erzia, of Burgas who joined him, completely defeated the Guman of Ugartiais, Ujday, son Kadan, and took Musha or Nurshad. During the Battle of Bursa, Kadan wanted to strike at the rear of the army of Hagar-Ushari, but on the way he lost his way and came upon Musha. In both battles Tuit was badly wounded but behaved heroically, and already in 1238, when Tuit was crawling around his posts near the town of Kozylsk, one of his wounds suddenly opened up and he died. Gayuk himself went with 3 tunes P$D Banjar to help his brother Kadan, but Yunus did not accept the fight and took his utterly exhausted army to the fortress of Saransk, the capital of Mordovia. The retreat of Gujuk allowed some of the Banjaks, led by Bokman and Altynbek, to escape from the besieged city. After the death of the Sultan of the Bulgarians, Altynbek, in Bulia, the 5th of November, 1236, the Emir Bokman was proclaimed the new king of Bulgaria, with Altynbek's son, Boyan Mohammed, as his co-ruler. The two rulers respected each other, but Boyan acknowledged Bokman's primacy. One part of the Bulgarians who escaped from Banjar went with Princess Altynbek to Jake, Ural, and another with Sultan Bokman to Savarkand or Kawalsuvar, which later received the name Serai Almaras. Gayuk with Mankai, Imengu, son of Tului, began to pursue the retreating Sachin Bokman in the province, and the following rumors began to come to Yunus. All the Kare-Bulgari, Pomads, were killed by the Tatars without any quarter, but the rich agricultural alls they took care not to ruin without special necessity. It turned out that Ghazi-Baba had agreed with Batay to supply the Tatars with produce and fodder. Bokman learned the same thing and took to burning the agricultural alls. From the burnt alls he took those capable of becoming soldiers with him, and sent the rest of the people to settle in Bulgar-Ulkarij, Kazan, Bulgaria under Boyan Mohammed. And the Kare-Bulgarians themselves set fire to their alls and joined Bokman with all their people. To supply the Tatars with produce and fodder, Ghazi-Baba, as viceroy of the Kankan-Ugatai, the Ujday Khan of Mongolia, in Belinja, Eastern Europe, in 1237 also enlisted the Georgy Bezumny, Yuri Vvolodovich Suzdalski, Barak, Yaroslav Vvolodovich, father of Alexander Nevsky, and Kichagurgi, Yuri Invarovich Ryazansky. Georgy Bezumny was the first to send the Tatars 4,000 talis of produce and fodder, to which Kichagurgi added 2,000 kisan talis. Ordu, Saiban, Sheban, and Kurash, Argasun, heading 3 Tumen, accepted this caravan, but the knowing of it by the sons of Bati Ashladek, Petar Ozdanukovich according to Russian sources, Kabar and Belabey, Philip Nyanka, Hager-Uglay or Hagazade at the sanction of Iozek or Yazek attacked the caravan and seized it. Hager-Uglay's Udalts, among whom were the Kisans of Kushtan and the Kara-Burjans, Circassians, and Kara-Burtasai, Mordvi, of Burgas, the son of Arzan, Ivan Asen II, king of Danubian Bulgaria, took captive Erman, Roman Ingurevich Ryazansky, who was the foremost brother of Kichagurgi, and Iu Vsevolodovich, son of Georgi Bezumny, then ambushed them and by knocking down trees caused panic among the Tatars and forced them to flee. Hager-Uglay and Kushtan offered the captured Balinese, Russians, to go over to the side of the Bulgarians, but they refused and were released. The loss of the caravan caused a bizarre scandal at Batay's headquarters in Bulgar Bazar Zavolji, which the Tatars began to call Urda Bazar. Fearing disgrace and punishment, Ordu, Saban, and Kyrgyz invented the following lie: Erman and Iu treacherously went over to the side of the Bulgarians and together with them attacked the Tatars. The Tatars, because they had not broken the friendship with the Balinese, preferred to retreat. Batay ordered Erman and Iu to come to him and explain, but they did not come, and then he believed the liars. The Tatars looked upon the Balinese, Russians, as their last slaves. Here is the order Ghazi-Baba sent in 1237 to Georgi Bezumny: you are obliged by agreement with the people of Nadan, who are with you, to submit to the Tatars and surrender your land to them, and also to send them 4,000 taligs of produce and fodder every 6 months. And this is what Ghazi-Baba commanded Barak: if thou wilt, as thou sayest, join thyself with all thy land to the Tatars, then, to begin with, give on them 6,000 talus of produce and fodder. These messages were intercepted by ours. Ours captured, as Ghazi-Baba himself admitted, about 200 Tatar and Ishkul, Kievan Russian, ambassadors and 500 couriers. With the same order, in order to be able to reach, sometimes 3 to 5 couriers left by different roads and under different legends. 30,000 Tatars. Before the battle Hager-Uglay forbade taking prisoners, so it was extremely fierce. Barak turned out to be a lucky man. His caravan of 6,000 thalai from Bursala, Pereyaslavl, reached the Tatar troops at Saban Banjar, Ishigali, shortly after the defeat of Hager-Uglay. The Ardshants of Beda, son of Kai, prince of the Poltava Bulgars, and the Kara Bulgarians of Mikhail Vsevolodovich Chernigovsky, A.K. Andashi, dependent allies of A.K. Bulgar, attempted to repel the Taligs, but they acted very piecemeal and failed to overcome the caravan guarding Basorks of Kalib, Gleb, son of Kara Batislav, and the Kalaks, here the Pereyaslav Torks and Pechenegs, of Buray, son of Bulari, grandson of Turgai. And Sarman, whom his brother Kurbanas had ordered to attack the caravan at Kursk, fully joined the Irma I of Buray. The Irma of Buray Birkai, Burk, joined his army, and allowed Kalib to return. There were still 20,000 Kalaris left with Bulari, and with these he joined Birkai in 1239. No sooner had all the merchants and craftsmen been removed from Banj than Ghazi-Baba set out on the road to Bokman, south to the lower Volga, and forcibly united the surviving population into alls ruined by Bokman and the Tatars, 3 to 5 of them organizing an AUL. At that, by agreement with Batay, he issued the ruined inhabitants with a certificate of ruin so that the Tatars would not ask them for food and fodder. The Tatar Karkans Guyukan Mankai failed to find Bokman at the mouth of the Bulgar Idol, Volga, and were forced to return without anything. By this time the Banjar was already ruined, summer of 1237, and Batay, Birkai, and Ordu, all sons of Juchi, Buri, grandson of Jagatai, having left 3 tumans on Quran, set out for Nurshad. Their Yunus was already waiting for them with his army. Mikhail Kara-Bulgar, Mikhail Vsevolodovich Sveti, the son of Kizil Bulgar, the red or beautiful Bulgarian, Vsevolod Chermne, sent to his brother-in-law Yunus 3,000 fighters led by his son Rostislav, 1,000 Kara-Bulgarians and 2,000 Circassians, ancestors of the Karsaks. At the Kisan Bekastabi, who was with Yunus, 2,000 Kisan Circassians arrived, so that at Yunus there were 8,000 strong fighters. To these he added 10,000 Muscelian, Mordovian, infantrymen of burghers. With these forces, Yunus and his allies fearlessly went up against 10,000 Tatars and 30,000 Itbash, Bulgarians from Mongolia in the service of Batay, and Turkmen, Bulgarians from Transcaspia in the service of Batay. The battle near the town of Muksha or Nurshad, which the Tatars burned on the 5th day of the fighting, lasted 22 days, the main Bulgarian army being outside the town all the time. The infidels lost 3,000 Tatars, Mongols, and 15,000 Kurmai, mercenaries, while ours lost 1,000 Burmese Bulgarians, 2,000 Kara-Bulgarians, 500 Kisans, and almost all the Kara-Burmese infantry, all 13,000 fighting men. On the last day of the battle, the Kara-Bulgarians got a little carried away in the attack and got surrounded. The remaining Bulgarians had to relieve them from the enemy encirclement. Fortunately, 5,000 Arjans, Poltavians, came rushing in, led by Bada's son, Arjamak, and with a daring flank strike forced the Tatars to retreat after a while. Taking advantage of this, ours drove the Kara-Bulgarians out of the encirclement and retreated into the Kara-Burtish forest, which the Tatars did not decide to enter, and headed for the town of Hager-Voronezh. Yunus suggested to the allies not to disperse and to organize a sudden attack on Batay in Hazer, but the Kara-Bulgarians and the Ions, despairing of their losses, returned to their lands. Only the Kisans, led by Astabi and the Ataman of Alashor, remained in Yunus's army of Burtas. Emir Yunus reported to King Boyon Mohammed about the situation in Burtas, the right bank of the Middle Volga, and the king in response ordered him to abandon Mashkal and unite with his son Jurash's Umma, around Jun-Bulgar, Nizhny Novgorod. And Batay, having received a reinforcement of 50,000 Itbash and Turkmen, again felt confident and again began to send in all directions ambassadors and couriers with threats. The Itbashis captured by Yunus reported to the Argasabashia commander that new troops on their way to Burtas had been attacked by the Bulgarkes, the Mongol nickname for Altynchak, and the Itkusids, the Mongol nickname for the Bulgarians of Bokman, and had lost 5,000 Tatars and 10,000 Itbashis and Turkmens. Enraged by the losses, Guyuk ordered 1 Tatar Tumen and 3 Itbash and Turkmen Tumen to occupy Bulgarbazar and Zarkand, the future Saraychik, to guard the road from Tubjak, Kazakhstan, to Burtas. The supply of this Tatar Suba order, with everything necessary, Ghazi-Baba ordered 3,000 alls in Kizil Bulgar or Samar Bulgar, Samar Bulgaria, and 1,000 alls in Bashkurt. But this Tatar Suba failed entirely to secure Kanglai, and the men of Bokman and Altynchak many times seized the food stalls, broke up the enemy's detachments and embassies, and burnt their halts. Boyon appointed the armies of Altynchak and Bokman as the left wing, and the army of Yunus as the right wing of the Bulgarian army. Leaving west of the Shi, Don, a shelter of the Tumuli of Karan, son of Kakan Jan, Van, king of the Karaites, and in Kabenzai, Penza, a shelter of 3 Tumuli of the Turkmen B. Bekbulat, son of Kushbird, Batay on the 3rd day of the month of Nardugan, December, began to move into Berlin, northeast Rus. As Batay had expected, Georgi the Foolish and Kicha-Georgi, both Yehudi, Talmudic, sectarians, by order of the House of Naden, surrendered their possessions to the Tatars and left for themselves only the capital cities. But Batay, seeking to weaken the influence of Guyuk, the chief representative of the House of Naden in Alatay, in Mongolia, decided to unite and either families of Jurgis Bizumni and Kicha-Jurgis loyal to Guyuk, and to raise up his own people in their stead, the brother of Kicha-Jurgis, Kin, and the brother of Jurgis Bizumni, Barak. To this end, Batay destroyed the capitals of Kisan, Ryazan, and Kortjak, Suzdal. Georgi the Foolish and Kicha-Georgi, completely unaware of Batay's secret arrangements with Kin and Barak, prepared by Ghazi-Baba and charmed by the Kara Ustai, the emissaries recruiters of House Naden, showed carelessness. Guyuk, because of his immense presumption, also grasped the meaning of Batay's game too late, only when Batay became the master of the situation. Mikhail Kara-Bulgar, chief of all the true defenders of Ishkul, offered Kicha-Georgi to fight the Tatars together, but the sworn Kisan Bek of the Karastai rudely refused Kara-Bulgar's help. Hin, who went to Batay as Kisan ambassador, quickly found common ground with him. Hin envied Kicha-Georgi in everything, and was willing to do whatever was necessary to gain power over Kisan. Just so, he envied Jurgis the Fool and was willing to do anything to gain power over Kortjak and all of Ishkul and Barak. As early as 1228, Barak organized a conspiracy against Georgi Bizumni at the suggestion of King Mir Ghazi, 1225 to 1229. After Mir Ghazi's death, Barak began to support Sultan Altynbek, 1229, 1230 to 1236, but Altynbek's fall from power in the spring of 1229 foiled Barak's plan. Coming to power for a second time, Sultan Altynbek notified Barak of the Jehud plot against Great Bulgaria, which was joined by the Jurgis the Foolish, the Kicha-Jurgis, the chiefs of the influential Kurmaki, a German community in Major Hungary. Barak did not believe this, but when the Tatars, without much fighting, if one does not count the Battle of Moscow, came out against Bulima, the city of Vladimir, he quickly saw the light. While the Tatars were thundering through the city of Kisan, in with his Kisan Tumen was traveling through that bailiwick and taking their cities one after another from the frightened Kisan Beyks without a fight. Gurji the Foolish ordered his son Ayu, Vsevolod, to do the same in Korchak. When the Tatars approached the ancient Bulgarian town of Kulama, located on the Kisan-Korchak border, the local Bey, Erman, Roman Ingorevich, and Ayu welcomed him with bilmans and a ball. Moreover, they prepared for handing over to the Tatars a wagon of 3,000 thaligs of produce and fodder. The two Beyets did not know that they had been sentenced to death by Batey for the loss of the previous caravan. The Tatars, as they do masterfully, suddenly attacked the Balinese and killed Erman and some of his warriors. Only Ayu miraculously managed to escape, and this rescue was granted to him by God, but Ayu was called a Moran, slow of thought, for a reason. He did not appreciate God's gift, and later, at the siege of Bulimir, he surrendered out of stupidity to the Tatars and was immediately executed by them. The Tatars were assured that they would have as easy a time in Korchak as in Kisan Beylik. But in Korchak no less than a third of the Urus, the ruling nobility, constituted the Kurils or beardless Urus, Rus. Unlike the bearded Urus, who constituted the majority of the local Urus, the Kurils considered themselves Bulgarians and never surrendered their land to the enemy without a fight. The beardless Urus were led by Gurji Bezumni's son, Chokhair Bulima, Krechit Vladimir, a magnificent warrior and Bulgarian emir who served in Ak-Bulgaria, and the brothers Beli Bey, Philip Nieka, and Kabar Ulan. The Kurils fell into a frenzy when they learned of Gurji Bezumni's order to surrender Korchak to the Tatars, and not only refused to obey his order, but quickly organized their own army of 15,000 fighters and placed this army under Kabar's command. And Moscow's, Koshbeg Belabey fortified his Bulima in his city and defended it for a long time is the support of Kabar's army. After Mosha's fall, Kabar stymied the Tatars all their passage through Korchak. He marched in front of Batey, and wherever he could, laid ambushes and all sorts of difficulties for the Tatars. Thus his detachment took possession of the town of Berlin, Suzdal, which had already been surrendered to the Tatars, and fought to the last opportunity. Another of his detachments attacked a Tatar stable guarded by Saiban, Sheban, and deprived the enemy of 1,000 sledges of produce and fodder. Already halfway into Korchak, the Tatars began to starve and went completely berserk, wiping out entire villages for a sack of grain. The hatred of the Tatars for Kabar and his Kuril army became endless, and when Kabar, with the remnants of his army, hid in Galidzbazar, Terzhok, a town near Novgorod, the enemies reneged on their promise not to ravage the Galidz, Novgorod, places and began to storm that town with impetuosity. When the inhabitants of the town were completely without strength, many of them decided to surrender to the Tatars and asked Kabar to leave Galidzbazar. Kabar took pity on the citizens and signaled his detachment to stay outside the town. This detachment immediately attacked the enemy and carried off most of the Tatars in their wake, which enabled Kabar to get some of his citizens out of the city. Half of the citizens who escaped from the city were Ashkui, who through the forest took the people of Kabar to join the army of Yunus, while the Derg part marched to Jana Galij. In the defeat of Galidzbazar, the Kisans of Hind distinguished themselves, of which there were 12,000 in the Tatar army. Yunus was infinitely pleased at the coming to him of 5,000 of Kabar's splendid warriors, for he was just preparing an ambush for the returning Tatars from Korchak, and every man was precious to him. Kabar told Yunus that in the defense of Mosha, the chief city of the Korchak Kurils, Belabey had perished, and that the emir Bulima, with whom Yunus had fought against the Tatars in 1229, had been wounded and in a helpless condition had fallen into captivity. When the Tatars dragged Bulima to the walls of Bulima, Vladimir, and ordered him to order his hesitant brother Majid Mstislav Jurevich to surrender the city, the emir was the last strength to order Majid to fight the enemies to the last breath, and at the same moment he was cut to pieces by the Tatars. Gurji Bezumni was not in the capital. Alarmed by the attack of the Tatars on Ayu, he decided to hide in the secret wooded fortress of Amat, Sit, around which he lost his head. The removal of Gurji the Fool, as a man of Gayak, was conceived by Batey and carried out by the emir Ghazi-Baba. In sucking up to Ghazi-Baraj, his old debtor Pereyaslavl II Sviatoslav Vsevolodovich showed the emir the whereabouts of his brother and himself led the Bulgarians to his lair. Immediately after Jorpai Bezumni's demise, Barak, with Batay's permission, entered Korczak and became Ulubi, Grand Prince of that district. After his departure from Bashtu, Mikhail Kara-Bulgar, Michael Vsevolodovich, again occupied this one radion. This Mikhail, as well as his father, Kuzil-Bulgar, Vsevolod Cherny, as well as Kokli Mardan, the Knight of the Shadow, the Bulgarian name of Yaroslav Vsevolodovich of Chernigov, as well as Seba-Yuga, Igor Sviatoslavich of Novgorod-Seversky, as well as Georgy Bulgaruk, Yurt Dologruki, were Ak-Anders and E. Mir of Ak-Bulgar. In 1201 the weakened Seba-Yuga invited the Buluk of Bilekamir to Kara-Bulgar. In the Gozi Buluk Ishkin Hager-Uglay headed the Ertebuluk, 3,000 warriors, and in his Ertebuluk served his sister Tsarina. While the Ak-Bulgarian Buluk was sleeping in Kara-Bulgar, Mikhail managed to meet Tsarina and fell in love with her. Tsarina also fell in love with Mikhail, who had a rich man's appearance, and with the permission of Hager-Uglay, married her beloved. She bore Mikhail a son, Radji Rostislav, who was nicknamed Ak-Bulgar. When the Tatars defeated Kara-Bulgar, he became governor of the Kara-Bajanskiga, Danubian Bulgarian, region of Mar-Bulgar, Moravian Bulgaria, northern Serbia. No sooner had Ghazi-Baraj Umar passed from Korczak to Ak-Bulgar, spring 1238, and Yunus conquered Khan Mardan, Murom, Zun-Bulgar, Nizhny Novgorod, Kulyazma, Klyazma, Borchak, Gorokovets, and other towns and fortresses in Ak-Bulane, Pokovai. And all exits from Korczak to the south by order of Mikhail Kara-Bulgar with 20,000 troops fenced the Korbian, Kovui, Emir Kurmir Karat Mercurius, the Poros Eastern. On hearing of these preparations of the Bulgars, Batay summoned the Kurultai, at which the proposal of the Sardar of the army of the bearded Urusi, Kirai, was accepted. Cyrarius said thus, if the horde rushes through the positions of Yunus, it will all perish without a remnant, for the way there is exceedingly hard and without provisions. And if it rushes through the positions of Kurmir, it will be able to pass if Kuran kidnaps the Kara-Bulgarians of Kurmir. Kirai's grandfather was Tarlai, who had two sons, Ermai or Lek Ermai, father of Kirai, and Malay. When Georgy the Foolish in 1221 betrayed Ermai to Chelbia for having in 1220 escaped from the subjection of Pereyaslavl, Sviatoslav Vsevolodovich, and arbitrarily attacked Ashla, Kazan, or Ushal, together with the Kara-Unjay robbers, the little Kirai was taken in charge of Ermai's brother, Malay, for education and upbringing. When a son was born to Kirai, he, in honor of his grandfather, gave him the name Molayadjim. In 1238, Molayadjim was 6 years old and he was already at war as his father, as the bearded Urus made their sons warlike in their childhood. But Chelbia did not execute Ermai, succeeding in detecting in him a useful man for the state, and sent him to the service in Baigul, western Siberia, was a detachment of 2,000 captured Balinese, Russians. This Kichi Buluk, small regiment, 1.5 to 2.5 thousand fighters, became the mainstay of the governors of Baigul of the lineage of Genghis Khan's son. Ermai no less than 15 times took from the Tatars Kazal Yar, Petropavlovsk, Kazakhstan, and the whole of Ulug-Tuba and then defended it to the last opportunity. There were times when his Kichibuluk reached as far as Atbasara and Akmulla. He elevated the Ulf Beg Taibuga to the throne of Baigul and received from him the name Karaja, Karacha. Ermai completely wiped out the suddenly captured Tatar garrisons in Kazaz-el Yar, and the Tatars began to say, "Don't say you've had a good time until you've passed through Kazaz-el Yar." Subiatai, Subyade, succeeded in driving Ermai out of Kazal Yar and chased him for a long time across the steppes, but failed to catch up with him. After that, Ermai captured Kazal Yar from the Tatars 3 more times, in 1246, 1248 and 1256, and destroyed them. Batay had the army of Kirai, which at the beginning had 30,000 bearded Urus or Tsaki, Katsaps, head south, and ordered the Kisan Umar of Hind to head east. The Kisan Umar immediately ran into several ambushes by Yunus, and from it only 1,000 men reached Yona Kisan, Novaya Ryazan, Pereyaslavl Ryazan, along with Kin himself. Thus Yunus and Burgas took revenge on Hin, Ingvar, the son of Pereyaslavl, for the attack on the 1,000 Burgas people of Burgas in 1229. And Kirai spent almost 2 months clearing the passes of the Saruba that Tyt, Prince Kozelski, Titus, had made under the fire of the Kara Bulgarians. Only near the town of Kozylsk, Batay Suba, horde finally managed to break away into the steppe and join with Kuran. Kuran with his 3 tumen demanded in motion to throw Kermir from Kazil, but was attacked in the flank by Yunus and found himself in the center of the fire. Kuran was not dismembered only because 2 tumen brothers, Buruldai and Kalmak, sons of Batay's brother, Chambek, came to his aid. Chambek, killed by Alois in the Almash War, 1223, is not to be confused with the son of Subatay, named in honor of this brother of Batay. A detachment of Bajda's Ions, Poptor Bulgars, also fought in Kermir's army. Kuran wanted to wipe off the face of the earth the Beylik of the Ions Miryuba, but when he headed towards Poltava, the Saxon army of the governor Juga, struck from the south against his left flank. Enraged, Kuran was forced to cool his heels. While Duggar was on the Don, the Tatars could do nothing against Yunus's army. It was only when 3 Kyrgyz tumen arrived from Bulgar to the aid of Batay Suba that he was able to send against Juga Mankai's 2 tumen and the replenished by all requirements tumen of the brigand Kalgan, one of the Polovtsian chieftains. Attacked from 2 sides, Juga began to retreat to the Shuar ford, but around it he came upon a Tatar ambush and perished. Sultan Bokman appointed Goluberkit Karat Burkat as the new governor of Sarshin, and he placed Juga's army under the command of Kanjarhin. In the same autumn, Kanjarhin, on Burkit's orders, again crossed the Shire, and joining with the detachments of Kai Arjamak's son and Georgi Konjak's son, Yuri Konchakovich, Kurbanas, massacred 10,000 Kyrgyz and 20,000 Tatars, Itbashis, and Turkmen of Kuran. The Tatar Karkans, whose army suffered heavily, accused Batay of defeatism because he panicked and fled at the unexpected appearance of the Bulgarian Bahadurs on Goluberkit. The disgruntled Karkans forced Batay to fight Burkit with his own forces. Batay sent Birkai on a march to Keralabuga, but he preferred to make peace with the Bulgarian Buluk Bashiri without any fighting and enlist them in his service. Taking Arjamak, Kurbanas, and Kanjarhin into his service, Birkai promised that he would not use their forces against Bulgarians. Birkai gave their people lands near Shah. The previous rulers of these lands marched as the Tatars on a campaign to Bolin, northeast Rus, and died, and their families perished of starvation in the winter of 1237 to 1238. Some of these possessions had formerly been the subatta of the Karlari, Pechenek Turkic, B. Karasan, son of Kerguza. He joined the Gayak under Banjar with 60,000 Karlaris and a huge cavalry, hoping for the favor of the Tatars. But they, having scarcely begun their aggression against Kisan, took away the last of his men and condemned them to starvation. When Karasan learned of the doom of his Suba, horde, the Tatars, with their characteristic treachery, told him that his people had been converted by the AK Bulgarians. Yunus tried to open Karasan's eyes and win him over to his side, but he preferred to remain a Tatar to the end. In the month of Ulfkerlark, January, Gayak Mankai and Buri entered AK Balain, ruled by the Emir Yunus. Yunus, who was joined by the remnants of the Kisan and 2 Artanian, Baltic, regiment sent by King Boyan Muhammad, fought desperately. The Tumen of Karasan, marching foremost of the Tatars, was cut to pieces by the Bulgars, and thus the Shiite Kalayans were wiped out. Gujak and Mankai lost 1/3 of their forces, Buri half, and all of them fell into a terrible rage and spared no one. But the natives did not think of surrendering. They did not like to submit to any strong power, and therefore they defended their freedom to the last. And what else to say about the Bulgarian Bahadurs? Each of the 12,000 warriors of Yunus who died killed 3 Tatars or their mercenaries. It was only after months of fighting that Emir Yunus al-Bulgari's utterly bloodless army retreated to Radilov on the Volga, where Boyan Mohammed himself arrived to meet it. The terrible losses of the Tatars in the battles was AK Bulgar's army forced them to give up the thought of attacking Bulgar Ulkarij or Mengu Bulgar, Kazan Bulgaria. After these battles, Boyan Mohammed concluded a peace treaty with Ghazi-Baba, under which Ghazi-Baba recognized the independence of Mongol-Bulgar and undertook not to attack Boyan Mohammed's possessions, and Boyan Mohammed was obliged to withdraw the Artan regiments from Ak-Bulgaria. Yunus, as a parting gift to the Artanians, gave them all the spoils of war, and the king gave them horses, arms, and armor. The 3 Artan bulls, in which the best men of the Shambuti, Lithuanians, the Jumgal, Latish, and the Markbash, Estonians, served, returned to their homeland via Korczak with their regimental banners and accompanied by the men of Ghazi-Baba. In these regiments, after the loss of a third of the fighting men, 12,000 more remained. Along with them at some time passed through Korczak on the road to Janagalij Boyan's son from the Magyar bull Larish, István, who had been appointed Mengubulgar's ambassador to Janagalij. He wished to cross the Korczak to Janagalij without delay, but Barak, Yaroslav Vsevolodovich, learning of his coming, invited him to reside with him in Bulima. Larish was struck by how quickly Barak rebuilt Bulima, under which no less than 2,000 structures were being erected at once. From this, Larish correctly concluded that Barak intended to maintain peaceful relations with the Tatars. All through the first day they talked about the need to maintain peace at all costs between Mengubulgar and Korczak. "We Bulgarians must not make war on each other," said Barak confidently at the negotiations, and with this phrase he deployed Larish towards him. And Larish took Barak to his heart by saying to Korczak Zulubia, "We are bound to be friends, just as Kakan Ibrahim Balthavar, 1006–1025, and Kakan Bulumar, Vladimir Sviatoslavich, 980–1015, were friends, and I will keep not only peace but also love between our countries." After the bath, in which Barak personally whisked Larish with brooms, they moved on to a feast with Barak's closest people. At the entrance to the banquet hall of Barak's new palace, the 2 daughters of the Ulubia, Argabika, Tagafia, and Laysan, first spring rain, sometimes called Alexandra, handed Larish a cup of bal and a platter of barley porridge and meat. Laysan, holding the bowl, looked straight at Larish, but Argabika, holding the dish, did not raise her eyes to him and was all flushed with embarrassment. Although these maidens, considered the first beauties in Ishkul, Rus, and not inferior to each other in beauty, Larish fell madly in love with Argabika at first sight. It is said that Argabika had preserved the beauty of her great-grandmother Bishelbi. Bishelbi, Visheluba, lady, by of 5, Bish virtues, ul, is the most famous daughter of Kalib, Gleb Ryazansky, born in 1150, died in 1239, indeed possessed 5 virtues: beauty, eloquence, intelligence, singing ability, and performer of good, tambura. Her first husband was King Otiak Janti, 1164–1178, to whom she bore sons Altynbek and Kalib, Bogota, Gleb, and a daughter Uljana, talented, Uliana and Olga, and her second husband was the Emir Konjak according to Russian sources, to whom she bore sons Georgi or Kher-Georgi and daughters Laysan, Solia, and Ferdors. In addition to these, Bishelbi raised the foster daughter Yaroslu. Yaroslu became the wife of Bulima, Vladimir, son of Igor Sviatoslavovich, and bore him a son, Tahir Vsevolod. Ferdors became the wife of the most skillful rider of Ishkul, Rus, Subai, Mstislav Sviatoslavich Kozelsky, and bore him a son Bulgar. The daughter of Bishelbi and Otiak Uljana in 1185 became the wife of Emir Kadan, Kotian in Russian annals, the Burmese Kara Andash, independent ally of Ak-Bulgaria. This Uljana is also called Kher Uljana. She gave birth to her husband's daughter Kaisal Uljana, beautiful Uljana, who became the wife of the Beaker of Galid's Orden, the Prince of Gallic Mstislav Udalorj. This Kaisal Uljana bore her husband a daughter Yash Uljana, young Uljana, who became the wife of the Bey Daniel of Galicia. Bishelbi's mother, wife of the Bey of Kisan Kalib, was also named Uljana. Her father was the Bey of Bursala Rashtorle, Rostislav, son of Georgi Bulgaruk, Urith Dolagruki. During her life Bishelbi was very impetuous and liked to interfere in everything. Thus, in 1185, she organized the escape of Seba-Yuga, Igor Sviatoslavich, from captivity, for Yuga was her uncle, being the son of Marbika. and the daughter of Marbika, the sister of Ugarudjan, became the wife of the Bey of Shamlin-Erman, the Smolensk Prince Roman Rostislavich, and bore to her husband the famous Shamlin and Bashtu Bey Boris, or Ulag Beris, Tiger, the Great Tiger, Mstislav Romanovich. In 1207, Bishelby reconciled Kizil Bulgar, Vsevolod Cherny, the Deva of her Ferdors, with this Beris and thus saved Beris' life. In 1223, after the death of Jurgis's son and son-in-law Danil, Bishelby, her face black with grief, came to the Bashtu of the Kurultai, military council, of the Ishkul Bags, Kievan Russian princes, and said to them, "You are all my relatives and friends of Ak-Bulgaria. And I, as your mother, elder sister Dowani, grandmother, and mother-in-law, unanimously urge you to go to war against the Tatar atrocities and help Ak-Bulgaria. Remember that Ishkul, Rus, and Ak-Bulgaria, Volga Bulgaria, are the two brotherly halves of old Great Bulgaria, and so help Ak-Bulgaria as your own brother." The Kurultai chiefs of the Kur-Bulgarians, Steppe Bulgars, Kurbanas, Bernai, Kaidan, Kalgan, and Kharasan, present at the Kurultai, promised by oath either to defeat the Tatars or to die together with the Ishkuls. Kalgan and Kharasan turned out to be oath breakers, and Bishelby cursed them thus, "May not only they but also their clans be wiped off the face of the earth." And this curse was fulfilled. Yunus, whose Buluk regiment then stood in Kaziel, Kozulsk, awaiting Chelbia's order to advance against the Tyljergi, foolish Yuri Vvolodovich, also decided to march against the Tatars, and Bishelby embraced and kissed this grandson of hers in front of everyone. The Cyclano-Bulgarian, Ukrainian-Bulgarian army, led by Beres, Mstislav Romanovich, and Yunus, repulsed the Tatars from Kalgasuba, the territory between the Dnieper and the Kalka River, and positioned themselves for a decisive blow at the Almash Aul, now Donetsk, Ukraine, on the right bank of the Almash, Kalka River. Here a Taba camp was set up, surrounded by two circles of tools and loads, in which the Shamlin and Bashtu infantry with Baris and his two Shamlin relatives were stationed. On the flanks of the Tabia stood the horsemen of Yunus, commanding the Ak-Bulgarian detachments of Kurbanas, Kaidin, Bernai Beda, and also the Ak-Bulgarian Subi of Kalgan and Karanas, and the Urus Bulgarian cavalry, who had joined the Ak-Bulgarians. None of the chiefs in the campaign suspected that Kalgan and Karanas were already in league with the Tatars. The Saklan Bulgars and Urus were 50,000 strong, the Ak-Bulgars 30,000 strong, the Anshian Circassians 5,000 strong, and the Kalaks, unions of Turks and Pechenegs, of Kalgan and Karanas 30,000 strong who had joined the Ak-Bulgars. The army of the Tatars was composed of 25,000 Tatars of Sabatyai, 50,000 Turkmen of Kushberd, 35,000 Kyrgyz, including the Itbash, and 20,000 Mihan, Azerbaijani, infantry, all 130,000 soldiers, not counting the Tumen of Kuran. Of the Saklans, 10,000 Bashtu and 5,000 Shamlin infantrymen were firmly entrenched in Tabyra, and these were the best infantrymen in the world, especially the Shamlins, 5,000 Galicians of Orden, Mstislav Udoly, and 5,000 Kara-Bulgarians, Chernigovians, of Subai, Mstislav Kozelski, made up the cavalry reserve commanded by Timzin, Mstislav Nemoy, and 25,000 horsemen prepared for an attack from the left wing of the Urus Bulgarian army of Beres and Yunus. Of Ak-Bulgarians and Kalaks of Yunus, 5,000 Kalaks of Kalgan and 20,000 Kalaks of Kharasan led by Kharasan himself were sent by Yunus to the rear of the enemy, 6,000 Burta Bulgars of Yunus, 6,000 Arjun, Poltava, Bulgars of Beda, 6,000 Kalgai Bulgarians of Bernai, 6,000 Behrman Bulgarians of Kaidan and 6,000 Jeremel Bulgarians of Kurbanas prepared to attack the right wing of the Urus Bulgarian army on the right bank of the Almash River.